Praise be to Allah, the Lord of the worlds, the creator of the universe, the one who does not need anything and is not similar to any of the creation. I humbly ask Allah to raise the rank of our Master Muhammad, his kind al and companions, and to protect his nation from that which he feared for it. Among the obligations is to perform 5 prayers within the day and night. It is obligatory upon every Muslim who is sane and pubescent and is clear of menstrual and postpartum bleeding to perform these 5 obligatory prayers every day and night within their times. So to be safe from the sin, one must have entered the prayer while there is still enough time to perform the entire prayer within its time. For example, if the time of Dhuhr was from 12 noon until 3 p.m., if someone starts praying at 2:30 p.m., they are not sinful. Because when they started praying in this case, there was enough time within the prayer time to perform the entire prayer, then this person is not sinful. And that's why, inshallah ta'ala, today we will be talking about the times of the prayer. Because these 5 obligatory prayers, it is obligatory to perform them in their due times. It is not permissible, it is prohibited, it is a major sin to delay performing the prayer to delay it outside of its time, or to perform it before its time without a valid excuse. So the person is obligated to learn the times of the prayer and to perform each of these 5 prayers in their times and not to delay it or bring it forward without a valid excuse. And these 5 obligatory prayers are obligatory upon every Muslim who is sane and pubescent and is clear of menstrual and postpartum bleeding. Why do they say it's obligatory upon every accountable Muslim, upon every Muslim? Because the non-Muslim, the non-believer, we do not order them to pray while they are non-believers, they are non-Muslims. Rather, first, we call them to Islam and we order them to embrace al-Islam. So if they embrace Islam, then we order them to perform the prayer, fasting, and the rest of the obligations. So when do we order them to pray? After they embrace al-Islam. Because among the conditions for the validity of the prayer is for the person to be Muslim. That's why the Prophet ﷺ, when he sent Mu'adh ibn Jabal, the great companion Mu'adh ibn Jabal, to the area of Yemen, the south of Saudi Arabia, the Prophet ﷺ told him that he is going to meet non-Muslims, non-believers. The Prophet ﷺ told him, let the first thing you call them to is to testify that there is no God except Allah and that I am the messenger of Allah. The Prophet ﷺ told Mu'adh, if they agree to that, if they embrace Islam, if they follow you in that, then teach them that they are obligated, they are ordered to pray 5 prayers every day and night. So these 5 obligatory prayers are obligatory upon every Muslim who is sane. Sane, not insane, because we covered who is the accountable person in the beginning. And pubescent. So the little child who is not pubescent is not obligated to pray. So if they don't pray before puberty, they are not sinful because the pen is lifted on them, as was mentioned in the first chapter when we talked about who is the accountable person. Also, the woman who is in her menstruation or postpartum bleeding, she does not pray nor does she fast during her menses or during the postpartum bleeding. She is not allowed to pray and she is not allowed to abstain from eating and drinking with the intention of fasting. And also, she does not have to make up what she misses from the prayer, but she has to make up what she misses from the days of fasting that she missed because of her menstruation. For example, if she did not fast in Ramadan some days because of her menstruation, she has to make up the missed days of fasting, but she does not make up the missed days of prayer. So these 5 obligatory prayers are obligatory upon every Muslim who is sane, pubescent and clear of menstrual and postpartum bleeding, and they must be performed in their due time. So it's not permissible to delay it or to pray it before its time without a valid excuse. And why do we say without a valid excuse? Because if someone is traveling with the conditions that are specified in the religion by the scholars of Islam, if someone is traveling and the conditions are satisfied, then this person is allowed to delay Dhuhr and pray it in the time of Asr, or to bring forward the Asr prayer and pray it during the time of Dhuhr, or to delay Maghrib to Isha, or to bring forward Isha to Maghrib. So if someone is traveling and they're satisfying the conditions to do that, then they are allowed to delay Dhuhr to Asr, to delay the prayer of Dhuhr and pray it in the time of Asr, or delay Maghrib to Isha time, or to pray the Isha prayer in the time of Maghrib, or to pray Asr in the time of Dhuhr. So these are the combinable prayers if there is a valid excuse such as traveling. The combinable prayers are Dhuhr and Asr in the time of one of them, and Maghrib and Isha in the time of one of them. It is not allowed to delay the prayer of Isha until the time of Fajr, or bring Fajr forward to the time of Isha, or delay Fajr to the time of Dhuhr. No. If there is an excuse, one is only allowed to combine between Dhuhr and Asr in the time of one of them, and Maghrib and Isha in the time of one of them. So this is an example of an excuse. Traveling is an example of an excuse for someone to delay Dhuhr to Asr, or Maghrib to Isha, or to bring forward Asr to Dhuhr, or Isha to Maghrib. Also, another excuse is that it is also an excuse in the religion, in some cases, if the conditions are satisfied, to bring forward Asr to Dhuhr, or to bring forward the prayer of Isha and pray it in the time of Maghrib, if the conditions are satisfied because of rain. Because of rain also, during rain, if the conditions are satisfied, one is also allowed in a mosque or a similar place where the congregational prayer is performed to bring forward Asr to Dhuhr or Isha to Maghrib with the conditions that are specified. But if there was no excuse, no valid religious excuse to delay the prayer or bring it forward, then this person, this Muslim who is accountable and is clear of menstrual and postpartum bleeding, is obligated to perform the prayer in its due time. And to be safe from the sin, this person must have started the prayer while there is enough time within the prayer time to pray the prayer in its entirety. For example, if the time of Dhuhr was from 12 until 3 p.m., for example, and this person started praying Dhuhr at the time of 2:30, they are not sinful. Because if the time is from 12 till 3 and they started praying at 2:30, when they say Allahu Akbar and enter the prayer at 2:30 in this case, there is enough time within the prayer time to pray the prayer in its entirety. So this person is not sinful in that case. However, it is better for all the obligatory prayers, it is better to pray them immediately as soon as the person is certain that the time of the prayer is in. And that's why we're going to cover the times of the prayer, because of the importance of that. It's obligatory to learn the times of the prayer and to perform these prayers in their due times. So we start by talking about the times of these prayers, starting by Dhuhr, and then Asr, and then Maghrib, and then Isha, and then Fajr. And usually the scholars, when they mention the times of these prayers, they start talking first about the Dhuhr prayer, or it is also called the noon prayer. And why is that? Because amongst the 5 obligatory prayers, amongst these prayers, the first prayer amongst those that was prayed by the Prophet ﷺ was the prayer of Dhuhr. Between these 5 prayers, the first one prayed by the Prophet was the Dhuhr prayer, and that's why they start with it, and we will do the same. So these obligatory prayers, the first is the noon prayer, the Dhuhr prayer, and its time begins, the time of Dhuhr begins when the sun has declined westward from the middle of the sky. In the morning, before Dhuhr, the sun is towards the east. And after Dhuhr, the sun is towards the west. So as soon as the sun declines westward from the middle of the sky, it means that Dhuhr time is in. And if someone asks, how do we know that practically? Practically, how would we know that Dhuhr time is in? There are multiple ways. Amongst them is by observing the shadow. Before Dhuhr, the sun is towards the east, so the shadow is to the west. So as long as the shadow is to the west, it means that the sun is still in the east. It did not decline westward, so Dhuhr is not in. However, as soon as the sun declines westward from the middle of the sky, the shadow will be towards the east. So if we look at the shadow of any object, the shadow that is by the sun, and the shadow is towards the east, we know that the sun has declined westward, so it means that Dhuhr is in. Also, in the morning before Dhuhr, the shadow is very long. And as we approach Dhuhr, as we approach noon, the shadow starts getting shorter and shorter and shorter and shorter. And when the sun reaches the middle of the sky, it's not east nor west. When it is in the middle of the sky, that is the shortest shadow for an object on that day. And that time is called the time of zenith. And that shortest shadow for any object on that day, when the sun is in the middle of the sky, is called the shadow of zenith, shadow at zenith, when the sun is in the middle of the sky. And then as the sun declines westward from the middle of the sky, the shadow starts to get longer and longer. So if the shadow, we see the shadow getting longer and longer, it means that Dhuhr is in. So these are amongst the practical ways to know that the time of Dhuhr is in. So as soon as the sun declines westward from the middle of the sky, Dhuhr is in. And the time of Dhuhr remains until the time of Asr. And when does Asr start and the time of Dhuhr end? The time of Dhuhr ends and the time of Asr starts when the length of the shadow of an object becomes equal to the length of the object itself and the length of its shadow at zenith. For example, if there was a tree that is 3 meters in height, a tree that is 3 meters in height, in the morning the shadow is long, but it gets shorter and shorter. At the time of zenith, for example, its shadow, the shadow of that tree that is 3 meters in height, at zenith, for example, its shadow was 1 meter. So the shortest shadow for that tree on that day was 1 meter at time of zenith, for example. Then as soon as the sun declines westward, the time of Dhuhr is in and the length of the shadow starts increasing. So it was 1 meter and then it starts increasing. The time of Dhuhr remains until the length of the shadow becomes equal to the length of the object itself, in addition to the length of its shadow at zenith. So in this example, the time of Dhuhr remains until the length of the shadow becomes 4 meters. The length of the object is 3 meters and its shadow at zenith is 1 meter. So once the shadow becomes equal to the length of the object itself, in this example 3 meters, plus its shadow at zenith, in this example 1 meter, so the total is 4 meters, Asr, the time of Dhuhr is out and the time of Asr is in. And the time of Asr remains until the setting of the sun, which means until the disk of the sun disappears completely, sets completely in the western horizon. So if we can see the western horizon and the disk of the sun completely sets, disappears in the western horizon, this means that Maghrib is in and the time of Asr is out. And the time of Maghrib, and by the way, the Dhuhr is 4 rak'ahs and Asr is 4 rak'ahs. As for the prayer of Maghrib, it is 3 rak'ahs and Maghrib means sunset. So it is called the sunset prayer. The time of Maghrib, the Maghrib prayer, its time starts when the sun, the complete disk of the sun, it completely disappears, sets in the western horizon, until, and it remains until the redness disappears in the western horizon. When the sun sets, it doesn't go dark instantly, fully dark instantly. Rather, when the sun sets normally in the western horizon, what do we see? We see lights that are reddish lights. We see redness in the western horizon. And this redness disappears, and then there will be some yellowish light, and then some white light, and then it all disappears, and then we have darkness. In the Shafi'i school, in the school of Imam al-Shafi'i, may Allah raise his rank, the time of Maghrib starts when the sun sets completely, and it remains, the time of Maghrib remains until the redness in the western horizon disappears. This is the time of Maghrib in the Shafi'i school. So once this redness disappears in the Shafi'i school, Maghrib prayer, the time of Maghrib is out and the time of Isha is in. However, according to Imam Abu Hanifa, may Allah Ta'ala raise his rank, the time of Maghrib extends, remains until the redness disappears and the yellowish lights disappear and the white light disappears from the western horizon. And the order of these lights is that first we have the redness and then it goes, and then yellowish light and then it goes, and then white light and then it goes. In the Hanafi school, the time of Maghrib remains until the white lights in the western horizon disappear. And in the areas of Asham, in Bilad al-Sham, Palestine, Jordan, Syria, and Lebanon, in these areas, the areas of Asham, between the disappearance of the redness from the western horizon and the disappearance of the white lights after the yellow lights disappear is around 15 minutes. So based on that, in the Hanafi school, the time of Maghrib is a little bit longer in Bilad al-Sham, around 15 minutes longer than in the Shafi'i school. And I mentioned that because in most countries, in most Muslim countries, and the calendars that the Muslims follow nowadays, the majority of them, in the time of Maghrib, they follow the school of Al-Imam Abu Hanifa. So they follow in the calendars in most of the Muslim countries, they follow the Hanafi saying in the calendars that the time of Maghrib remains until the disappearance of the redness and then the yellowish lights and then the white light. So it is, like I said, in Bilad al-Sham, around 15 minutes longer. So that sunset Maghrib prayer, this is its time and the time when it leaves. After Maghrib is out, Isha prayer, the time of Isha prayer is in, and the prayer, the time of the Isha prayer, which is 4 rak'ahs, it remains until the true dawn, Fajr Sadiq, appears. So after Maghrib, when Maghrib is out, the time of Maghrib is out, Isha is in, and the time of Isha stays until the true dawn, until the Fajr Sadiq, the true dawn, appears. And the true dawn, the Fajr Sadiq, is a thin, horizontal light that appears in the eastern horizon. So the time of Isha, it will be dark, and it remains dark, and then before sunrise, one would see a very thin light, horizontal light in the eastern horizon. So this very thin light starts in the eastern horizon, and then it starts to widen, to expand, upwards and downwards. As soon as that white, thin, horizontal light appears in the eastern horizon, Isha is out and the time of Fajr is in. And that thin horizontal light is what is called in Arabic Al-Fajr Al-Sadiq, or the true dawn. And why do they call it the true dawn in Arabic Al-Fajr Al-Sadiq? Because in many areas, before this thin horizontal white light appears, before it by around 15 minutes, one would see a vertical light. It's not straight, a vertical light would appear in the eastern horizon, and this light does not stay for long. It stays for some time, and then it is followed, and it is followed by darkness, and then the true dawn appears. The scholars call that vertical light, they call it al-fajr al-kadhib, or if you want to call it the false dawn. And why do they call it the false dawn? Because someone might see it and think that the time of Fajr is in, where in reality the time of Fajr is not in, because the time of Fajr starts by the appearance of the true dawn, which is the thin horizontal line in the eastern horizon. And the time of Fajr, the Fajr prayer, which is 2 rak'ahs, it remains until sunrise. It remains until sunrise, which means until the first part of the sun rises from the east. So as soon as the first part of the sun rises, the time of Fajr is out, and there is no obligatory prayer until Dhuhr, until the prayer of Dhuhr, which starts when the sun declines westward from the middle of the sky, as was mentioned. So these prayers, these 5 prayers, must be prayed by every Muslim who is sane and pubescent and clear of menstrual and postpartum bleeding. And it is not permissible to delay them or to pray them before their times without a valid religious excuse, such as traveling with its details that are specified. Now, before ending this chapter, we will talk about 2 mas'alas, 2 cases. What if a prohibitive matter, such as menses, starts after the time of the prayer is in, without this person praying? To clarify what I want to mention, what's mentioned here regarding this matter, is that yes, a woman in her menstruation and postpartum bleeding, she is not obligated, she does not pray, and she does not have to make up the prayers that she misses while in her menstruation or postpartum bleeding. However, what if she did not have menstruation or postpartum bleeding? She was clear from all of that. So there was no prohibitive matter that prevents from praying, such as menstruation and postpartum bleeding. And the time of prayer was in. And let's say in this example, and she did not pray after the time of the prayer is in, she did not pray, and then the menses occurred, for example. Does she have to make up that prayer or not? This is the mas'ala that is being discussed and mentioned. To summarize it and to explain it briefly and in an easy way, inshaAllah tabaraka wa ta'ala, this is the judgment as simple as that. If a woman does not have any matter that prevents her from praying, such as menses or postpartum bleeding, and then the time of the prayer is in, let's say for example, Dhuhr is in at 12 o'clock. So she says, I'm gonna pray at 1. She says to herself, I'm gonna pray at 1 o'clock. She is not sinful. And then at 12:45, she started to have her menstruation. As soon as she has her menstruation, what does she do in that case? She does not pray. Okay, how much time passed in this example since the time of the prayer? 45 minutes. Does she have to make up this prayer or not? Basically, yes. In this case, she has to. But what's the judgment? What's the rule? The rule is as follows. If a prohibitive matter, such as menses, starts after the setting of the prayer time, after the prayer time is in by some time, the prohibitive matter, such as menses, it starts, she has to, has to make up that prayer if enough time has passed before the prohibitive matter, if enough time passed in which one was able to perform the prayer in its time. For example, if Dhuhr came in at 12, so she said, I'm gonna pray at 1 o'clock. 12:30 the menstruation started. We tell her, you must make up that prayer after the menstruation terminates and she takes the obligatory shower. She must make up this prayer because she could have prayed within these 30 minutes. However, if the time of Dhuhr came at 12 and she said, I'll pray at 1, and then 12:01, 1 minute past 12, the menses occurred, she does not have to make up this prayer. Why? Because not enough time has passed in which she could have performed the prayer in its time. She could not have performed the prayer, the Dhuhr prayer, in 1 minute, so that she does not have to make it up. And in what I mentioned, one only looks at the time of the prayer and not the matters of covering the unlawful nakedness or the matters of purification, because she could have done these things before the time of prayer was in. Yani, if Dhuhr was at 12 and she said, I'm gonna pray at 1, and then between 12 and 1, the menstruation started. Does she have to make it up? The answer simply is to say, if enough time passed in which she was able to pray before the menses started, then she has to make it up. And we only measure the time it takes for the prayer only, and not the time of purification, making wudu or covering the unlawful nakedness and the like, because she could have performed these things before the time of prayer was in. This is if she can do these things before the time of prayer is in. And why do I mention that? Because if someone has a disease such as incontinence of urine, this is a disease, a calamity. If someone has incontinence of urine, for all obligatory prayers, if they have incontinence of urine, for all the obligatory prayers, they must perform wudu. They must do the matters of purification after the time of prayer is in. So, if a woman has, for example, if a woman has incontinence of urine, and she is clear of menstrual bleeding, and then the time of prayer came in, and she said, I'll pray after 1 hour, for example. And then, within the prayer time, before she prayed, the prohibitive matter occurred, such as menses. Does she have to make it up or not? What is the answer? If enough time passed in which she was able to pray, she must make it up, or else she does not have to make it up. But if she has incontinence of urine, then she must do the matter, if the one who has incontinence of urine must perform the matters of purification after the time of prayer sets in. So in this case, if a woman has incontinence of urine and she did not have any menstruation, the time of prayer came in, and then the menses occurred, she has to make up this prayer if enough time passed since the time of the prayer and the menses, if enough time passed in which she could have performed that prayer and the purificatory matters that she needs, because she has incontinence of urine. Because if she has incontinence of urine, for example, she cannot do the matters of purification such as wudu before the time of the prayer. Rather, these must be done after the time of the prayer sets in. This is why he says, if a prohibitive matter such as menses occurs after a prayer time sets in, and there was time which was enough to perform that prayer, then one must make up that missed prayer. And we only look at the time it takes to pray only. In the case of also having incontinence of urine, if the prohibitive matter occurs after, such as menses, after a time which was enough to perform the prayer and its purification, then one must make up that missed prayer. The most common example of a prohibitive matter, what happens nowadays mostly, the most common case regarding this is the menstruation. But this is not the only prohibitive matter. Another prohibitive matter, for example, is if someone lost their sanity, if someone became insane. So if someone lost their sanity, they became insane, this is a prohibitive matter. So if it occurred, if it started after the prayer time set in, do they have to make up that prayer or not? The same details apply. If they are someone who can perform the matters of purification before the time of prayer sets in, then they have to make up that prayer if enough time passed in which there was enough time to perform the whole prayer. And if they also have incontinence of urine, then to be obligated to make up that prayer, this prohibitive matter such as losing sanity must have happened after there was enough time within the prayer time to perform the matters of purification and to perform the prayer. And finally, in this chapter, if on the other hand, the prohibitive matter such as menses terminates, it stops. So now this is the opposite. If a woman is having her menstruation and then the menstruation stops, if the menstruation stops, terminates in a time of prayer, while there was enough time to say Allahu Akbar within the prayer time, then she has to perform this prayer, she has to pray this prayer and the prayer before it if they are combinable for an excuse, like traveling, which are Dhuhr, Asr and Maghrib and Isha. So if a woman during the time of Dhuhr, while there is enough time to say Allahu Akbar during the time of Dhuhr, the menstruation terminates, she has to make up this prayer. So let's say Dhuhr is from 12 to 3. At 12:59, the menstruation stops. So she has menstruation, Dhuhr is in at 12 and she's menstruating. She does not have to pray. At 12, she does not pray, she's not allowed to pray. At 12:59, the menses terminated, the menses stopped at 12:59. What does she have to do? She has to pray the Dhuhr prayer. So even though in this 1 minute she doesn't have time to take the shower and pray Dhuhr, what does she do? She, during the time of Asr, in this case, she makes the obligatory shower and she prays Dhuhr and she prays Asr. And she prays Dhuhr because the menstruation terminated in the time of Dhuhr. So if the menstruation or any prohibitive matter terminates during the time of a prayer, while there was still enough time to say Allahu Akbar in the time, then one must perform that prayer and the one before it if they are combinable. So if the menstruation terminates during Dhuhr, she has to pray the Dhuhr prayer. If the menstruation terminates in the time of Asr, then she must perform the Asr prayer and the Dhuhr prayer, because Asr and Dhuhr are combinable. And what's the rule? If the prohibitive matter terminates during a prayer time, while there is enough time to say Allahu Akbar, she must perform that prayer and the one before it if they are combinable. So if it stops during Asr, she must perform Asr and Dhuhr, because Dhuhr and Asr are combinable. Whereas if the prohibitive matter terminates during Maghrib, one only has to perform Maghrib and they don't have to perform the Asr, because Asr and Maghrib are not combinable. And if the prohibitive matter terminates during the time of Isha, one has to perform Isha and Maghrib because they are combinable. And if this prohibitive matter terminates during the time of Fajr, one only has to pray Fajr and one does not perform Isha prayer, because Isha and Fajr are not combinable. And if this prohibitive matter terminates after sunrise and before Dhuhr, one does not have to pray Fajr or any of the prayers before, because it is not a time of prayer. And if it terminates during Dhuhr, then one has to pray Dhuhr only and not Dhuhr and Fajr, because Fajr and Dhuhr are not combinable. And by this, alhamdulillah, we have finished this very important chapter that talks about who is obligated to perform these prayers and the times of these obligatory prayers. I ask Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala to make us among those who pray the prayers sincerely for the sake of Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala in their due times, and not to be among those who leave out the prayers wal-'iyadhu billah, or delay them without a valid excuse wal-'iyadhu billah, because neglecting one of these prayers or delaying it without an excuse is a major sin. May Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala protect us from that, and Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala knows best.